Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Welcome back to Word Docs. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Matthews, and I'm here today with Dr. Alex Vickery-Howe.
Hello.
And Dr. Sean Williams.
Hello.
And we're all feeling a little bit lost for words, but also a bit more chipper than normal because we've ended our teaching for the semester. We're facing our marking. But most importantly, everyone, I finished the book.
Yay!
Well, that was really not enough cheering.
Well, I was going to we need like an applause track, don't we?
Can you clap, Sean? Successful clapping.
I thought you were going to say most importantly because we're here in the same room together.
We are. That was the other reason for celebration, is that for the first time all year, in fact, the last time we were all in the same room recording a podcast was December 2019.
Was it really?
It was.
Almost a year ago. In fact, a year. When this goes to air, it will have been a year.
Is that true?
Yeah, it was before Christmas.
Wow.
On Flinders campus with Tom Young producing us. I think we did like 6 episodes, did we?
I think that's right.
Yeah, we did a few.
And then ever since we have been doing it remotely because of the joy of 2020.
The plague.
The plague.
I think 2020's ended on an okay note. You know, it's like a bad movie that has a really good twist ending.
It's true, because I did finish the book.
Because absolutely has changed the entire year for me.
Yeah, it is more optimistic.
I've been cautiously optimistic.
We should probably be cautiously optimistic that we can stay on track this week. And actually,
not so optimistic about it.
I should do the hosting and get us on topic. So what we thought we'd talk about today was how we feel about art we love when the creators of those artworks disappoint us or let us down.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking about that, my mind immediately goes to J.K. Rowling and the mess in the Twitterverse she caused this year with her trans comments. I'm thinking about Woody Allen, Roman Polanski. There's so many of them.
Brett Ratner's another one. Not that I particularly like Brett Ratner films.
And
but
I'm not a fan of R. Kelly, but a lot of people are.
R. Kelly's shocking. Yeah.
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson, yes.
Yeah.
I go to
what is
dance
the point
class,
where you can divorce that?
and when Halloween was happening, she was putting Thriller on, and I cannot listen to Thriller anymore without.
And I love Thriller. I love many Michael Jackson songs, but I'm in the same boat now where can you divorce the genius, and I genuinely think he was a genius, from the reality of other parts of his life? I should say allegedly, I suppose, but can you make that distinction? I bought J.K.'s recent book, J.K. Rowling's, forget what it's called, something Blood, or I've got it on my shelf, but I've been moving house. And I actually felt guilty walking into the bookshop. And I actually had to say to the person who worked there, I said, are these sellings? To which she said yes. I said, look, I feel really torn about this. And she said, me too, because I'm a massive fan of these books. I love the Cormoran Strike novels. I think J.K. is amazing. And I agree with her. I was saying to Amy off air, I agree with her 99.97, let's say, % of the time, including on Twitter. Like most of her views on Twitter, I do agree with, and I follow her on Twitter and I often support her. But on this one issue, I'm vehemently opposed to her. But I have friends with whom I have that sort of relationship where we may agree on most things, but there might be something that we clash on. And it may be an issue like this one where objectively there are victims of that kind of rhetoric. Nevertheless, I don't think I can cut out everyone from my life with whom, I'm a vegetarian. What if I cut out every non-vegetarian from my life?
I wouldn't be here.
You wouldn't be here. So
You'd be stuck with me, Alex. That's a fate worse than death. A fate worse than being a vegetarian, some might say.
Well, what's interesting here, though, is that we're really going... I think this is a really important time to have this conversation because it goes to the heart of the divisions that we see playing out across the Western world since social media has risen.
Have you watched The Social Dilemma?
Not yet. That's on my list for
the algorithms, because I think what's interesting, sorry, I won't cut you off, but...
You just did.
But I will.
I just did.
I'll just continue.
I'll just do it really quickly and then you won't notice and it won't seem as rude as it was.
You confessed to it. That was the foolish part of your plan.
Is I admitted to it. And it's like robbing a house and go, I'm just going to take the vase really quickly. The thing I want to say very quickly, though, is that what's interesting about that documentary is it highlights the fact that it's not necessarily malicious. It's an algorithm. It's an algorithm that's designed to feed back what you like. And in some ways that's scarier because it's not a person in a black suit dividing us. It's an algorithm. It's like
when they got their AI and it became so racist and sexist.
Almost immediately.
Because it's rubbish in, rubbish out, right? So it's that thing of that feedback loop. But I think this topic's interesting because it gets to the heart of the idea of cancel culture, which is a term that is thrown around very loosely. And it gets to the difference between censorship and censorship, S-U-R-E, where you can kind of censure someone without cancelling the work. And then that line between what is the line between the work and the person.
Yeah, and also, I mean, what's the line between, I disagree and I stop you from, or try and stop you from speaking? I've been critical of cancel culture in some ways. I mean, I agree with the point that you made, Amy, a while back where none of these things are really being cancelled. I mean, like until very recently, Donald Trump was still president, although according to him, he still is right now.
He's going to have his television show.
Yeah, he'll still have a platform. All of those people will still have platforms. So
it's an ethical personal choice about whether you choose to.
That's right. It's an ethical personal choice as to whether you engage and how you engage.
And whether your institution engages. Like Milo, how do you pronounce his surname? Yiannopoulos?
Yes.
Who people stopped. They cancelled some of his lectures. Like, my university doesn't want to host you, Milo. And that's not cancelling so much as saying we just don't feel that
we're just not going to give you a forum. I mean, I had an argument, one of my many Twitter arguments with a Republican about that. And I think I've said on this show before, sometimes the Republicans call me a good liberal. That's my kind of label. I become a good liberal.
Is that because you're a white boy?
No, because most of them think I'm Hispanic or Middle Eastern because of my profile pic.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I get a lot of weird. I think the hyphenated name.
So you're not white enough.
Not white enough, and the hyphenated name does something to them. Because I had one that was saying, "You've got a hyphenated name. You're obviously one of them." And I genuinely went, "One of who?" Yeah. And so then I went, "I'm Welsh," and they went, "No one Welsh has a hyphenated name." I went, Catherine Zeta-Jones, John Rhys-Davies, it was like Rhys Davies, wonderful, Gimli. Anyway, we had a conversation about Milo, and they said, okay, you libtard, blah, 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 you would censor Milo, you wouldn't give Milo a right to speak. And I said, honestly, Milo can say whatever he wants, but he's going to have to deal with me laughing in his face as he does it. So,
and don't expect you, Alex Vickery-Howe, to amplify Milo.
No, I will not amplify Milo. I'll either ignore Milo or laugh at him. And when I said that, they said, "Oh, you're a good liberal then." And I thought, what does that mean? Yeah. And I think they have this idea that people like Milo and there's various other, we've got them here, Alan Jones, Peter Credlin, they've got platforms. I think from
platforms. I thought you
platforms.
Actually, not a bad.
I think from a right-wing perspective, they think these people are being persecuted, and my counter-argument is no, they're not. They've got platforms. We don't have to listen to them.
They just have a sense of entitlement that people should listen.
Yeah, and so it's an interesting one because I think laughter's a really good counter-attack. Did you see that guy? I think it was in Georgia, the one that mobbed the press conference, and he ran around, Trump won the elections, and they just ignored him. Because I think he was waiting to be dragged off, and because no one did, it just died. The fire just died. So
one of to get back on...
to end Alex's interruption.
Yeah. One of the ones that horrified me, an artist I liked when I was younger, was Orson Scott Card.
Yes.
Like, I remember reading the Endgame series when I was a teenager, and as a writer, really admiring his characterizations. I think he's very good at, in books, picking different points of view so that you can flip from one chapter to another, and they're people who have polar opposite. They might be enemies, and you have deeper sympathy for both of them. But then, of course, Sean, do you want to, because you've barely spoken, you should fill us in on the background around Orson Scott Card and why he might have broken my heart.
Oh, well, he's a bigoted, terrible human being. That's
it might be that.
Might be that. He's racist, he's homophobic, he's misogynistic, he holds beliefs that I find abhorrent on so many levels and uses religion to justify them.
Yeah.
And say, well, of course, homosexual people shouldn't exist because the Bible says that it's wrong.
Yeah, so he's very religious.
He's he's a Mormon, and not that there's anything wrong with Mormons in and of themselves. You know, I have Mormon friends, but most of my friends who are Mormons don't use Mormonism to justify being horrible to people who disagree with you.
I was so sad when I found that out, but I still read the books.
Yes,
not the new ones so much, but the old ones that I loved, I will reread.
When I was teaching your subject this year, Amy, I had to finally finish Ender's Game, which I'd started a couple of times and hadn't loved. I didn't read it as a kid. If I'd read it as a kid, I probably would have ripped through it and really liked it. But as an adult, I tried to read it, and I kept getting stuck on all the anti-Semitism and all that sort of
I
stuff
use it to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, which we did too in the classroom. But I did find it a very, very powerful book in certain ways.
It was the sequels I liked more when he gets more into philosophy, I think.
He probably becomes a better writer too.
Yeah, because that was very early on.
But it's a really interesting situation where when you're a reader, your only engagement, I guess until recently with Twitter and YouTube and all that sort of stuff, your only engagement with the author was through the books. So I grew up reading authors like Orson Scott Card and David Brin and Jerry Pournelle and Greg Bear. And later on, as a professional writer, I got to meet some of these people and had profoundly disappointing experiences, which I can't help it. I'm a social animal. I'm wired that way. It makes me less likely to read their work or want to read their work.
Well, I've always said to Jono that I don't want to meet my heroes.
Yes.
I just don't want to meet them.
But sometimes you meet them and they're wonderful. Anne McCaffrey was an absolutely beautiful human being. Tim Powers. And Tim Powers is somebody with whom I disagree on fundamental issues. He's a gun-toting Republican Catholic. You know, we don't agree on any points, but I love him, and he's a very dear friend of mine, and I would trust him with my life, but I wouldn't trust my life with Orson Scott Card, who thinks anybody with a PhD is a waste of space.
That's quite an extreme. That's quite an extreme example too, because I think something like J.K. Rowling is more nuanced, and partly I think she's interesting. Kate Grenville's another one I keep thinking about.
I was thinking of Kate Grenville as well.
Because of The Secret River, and it is still on curriculum, and we teach it, and the line between the text itself and then the author on Twitter or in lecture tours or being interviewed on radio, there's this conflation of the author and the work, which I was saying to Alex off air too, that I am very uncomfortable with as a writer, because I don't want to be visible at all to my readers. I find it really difficult even using social media. I just want to write the book and send it out in the world. I don't want to be part of it because I'm not the book.
No, it's interesting because I've always argued, and we talked about theme in a previous episode, I've always argued that one's ideology will leach through.
It does,
and I do believe that. But occasionally you set yourself the challenge of writing a character who's so different to you just because. Yeah. And sometimes people then go, oh, you must be that person. And it's like, Thomas Harris isn't Hannibal Lecter, but he wrote Hannibal Lecter. By all accounts, lovely guy who rode his bicycle around Miami, I believe. I wrote a fundamentalist Christian character, and a few people came after me saying, oh, you must be a fundamentalist Christian. And I went, have you followed my Twitter account? And what I'd done is I'd written a female character that embodied my views. But because I'd written her as a female, they went, that couldn't be him, which I thought was really interesting. That was my way of kind of
navigating that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think all of that's very interesting. But maybe the thing we keep circling around with all of these, asides and stuff is that to be an author or a playwright or a screenwriter now, your Twitter profile or your Facebook or your interviews, all of that is going to feed in a way that perhaps it didn't some time ago. JK would not be under the microscope in this way were it not for her Twitter account. I don't think. Totally. I think that book would have come out and no one would have really...
Absolutely. And the other thing I think as well is we've had the American election recently, but we all know even here in Australia when it's election season, or for Christmas is coming and if you're at the family Christmas table trying to talk to relatives, that people are not homogenous.
No.
Right? They have very disparate views. So you as an author are walking a tightrope, really, because you can't please everyone.
No.
It doesn't matter. So your ideology will leach through and some of it will be conscious. You have your conscious beliefs. And then there will be all the unconscious baggage baggage that you have from your culture.
Yeah. Or your
but
generation.
even if you're consciously trying to be, like, I'm putting this in quotation marks because none of you can see me, good, like trying not to offend people, trying to take the high road, trying to amplify things you believe and squash things you don't, you're still going to piss people off.
Yeah, absolutely. And
if you're not doing that, then chances are you're writing a medium piece of work.
we hate that word medium, don't we?
Yeah.
Word docs don't like medium.
Art should elicit a passionate response, even if it's one of hatred and loathing, you know.
I believe that. And Professor Julian Merrick, when he was at Flinders, said to me, you're just going to have to get used to that. That people are not going to like you. That's kind of why I'm on Twitter, is trying to get used to it. People are going to hate your guts. You know?
I thought he was just saying that to you because you're a horrible person. No,
totally fair. Totally fair.
You're a lovely person.
I love that Sean can't even let the joke. Like, it's like, I can't let it hang. Alex is fine. He's totally fine. He's lovely. But the other thing I think, and this is going to sound really weird, is I think, left of centre on pretty much any social issue you can name, and certainly radically left environmentally. But I would still be the champion of any right-wing author who wanted to put their stuff out there, even though I would hate it with a passion, and I would absolutely loathe that work. I still think they should get their work out there.
Yeah.
And that creates a weird cognitive dissonance within me where I'm like, I would champion that work, but then once it's written, I would bag the hell out of it. You know,
I would defend to the death your right to say something that I completely disagree with.
Yeah, absolutely that. But I would, once it happens, I would go red hot with rage.
Oh, yeah.
And it's such a funny thing, but I think it's important.
And the personal choices, I think, are interesting because, like I said, J.K. Rowling's still putting out books. And in fact, that conversation is actually quite useful because a lot of people were having that conversation around trans rights and trans oppression.
I think I learned a lot from that conversation, to be honest.
So I think it did push the needle, and even though lots of people were disappointed in her personally.
Amber Heard's still getting work.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been thinking about Woody Allen a lot as we're talking, and Roman Polanski, because I did a film degree and loved both of their work and just find them repulsive human beings, like rapists and pedos, and not able to now go and buy a movie ticket to their work.
It's very hard. With film, it's really hard because it's not just them.
No, I know.
There's a whole bunch of other people.
But I guess because they're such auteurs, and some of, I loved Woody Allen's earlier work, but I have not seen the recent stuff. Like, haven't seen Match Point, haven't seen Vicky Cristina Barcelona, haven't seen Blue Jasmine.
Have you seen Blue Jasmine's fantastic? Have you seen Polanski's Ghost Writer? I'm going to be careful how I say it because everyone thinks I'm saying Ghost Rider. Not the Nicolas Cage superhero film, but Ghost Writer with Pierce Brosnan and Ewan McGregor and the wonderful Olivia Williams, I think her name is. I hope I've got that correct. Who was played Adele DeWitt in Dollhouse, which was... It's kind of a series I kind of love-hate. I think it's not particularly well constructed, but there are moments I love.
Sweden on topic there.
Yeah.
And I love her in it. Like, as Adele DeWitt, she's gold. She has my best favourite line ever, which is someone says, "You played a good hand, ma'am." And she goes, "I played a very bad hand very well. There is a distinction," which I think is a great line. Anyway, Ghost Writer, Polanski, is a brilliant film. And I have that problematic relationship because I love the film. I love the performances. I love what the writing is saying.
Yeah.
And at the back of my mind, I'm going...
I know, and it pulls you out of the film.
Pulls you out of the film. And Ewan McGregor got in a lot of trouble for doing that.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, you can't blame an individual for a system. Like, they're all gross, those people working that system, but it is a system, and there's probably not very many films you could watch where there wasn't some kind of abuse on set or
someone that you're going to disagree with or dislike.
Do you know, I think that industry is so misogynistic, and I mean, as a woman, I've had this feeling for a very long time watching films. It's very hard to watch some films that a lot of people love because I just find them so misogynistic. So you kind of go, okay, so I can single out Woody Allen or Roman Polanski, but what about the entire system?
Well, this is the interesting thing because I was reading an article the other day that said this is actually the major divide between the left and the right. and it's really interesting, the right does think in terms of individuals and individual responsibility. The left does think in terms of systematic issues. So if you're left-leaning, you think of things as a system, whereas the right goes, oh, Bob's the problem. Yeah. Get rid of Bob and everything's okay.
But that's because they're implicated in the system and they don't want to admit to it.
Yeah, they don't see it. I don't think they see it. And so, I would agree. I see systemic issues. I was going to say systematic. I sounded like Danny Zuko in Greece. Hydromatic. It's a Greece, sorry, that's going somewhere else. So, I think it then becomes really problematic because if the system is the issue, then really there's nothing you can watch.
No, exactly. I guess that's what I was getting at is where you draw your line. And so for me, the line is I can't actually watch those films without thinking of them. And so there's no point. Like I don't want to. It's the same with Michael Jackson. I can't listen to him anymore because my, childhood of listening to him is wiped out by watching Finding Neverland. And
which was very confronting.
And just thinking, I'm not going to, I've got no interest. I can't do it.
I've got another related question for both of you. So I'm going to try and phrase it in a really simple way. What is more important, or maybe not, it's not about what's more important, but how do you weigh the message of the art versus the message of the author? So to use Ghostwriter as an example, the message or the theme or the idea of that film is something that I really believe in.
Yeah.
It's kind of a thriller really, but it kind of struck a chord with me. And there are probably better examples than that. Even some Woody Allen films or perhaps works by J.K. that ideologically are putting something positive into the world.
Like Roman Polanski's The Pianist.
Yes.
Another film we have to be careful when pronouncing.
You're very careful when you pronounce that
But that is brilliant. That's telling someone else's true story.
And that's become, and so you go, the thing that's going out into the world is very positive. Yeah. The person behind it is not.
Someone like Roman Polanski too, like Holocaust survivor. There are intersections going on. But
and
also
these horrible things that happen to
a child
Sharon
rapist
Tate.
And refusing to come and face the music for that one.
The question you're asking is, do the ends justify the means?
Well, yeah, but also that I suppose it's an ends justify the means question, but it's also
a human mess question.
It's a human mess question because sometimes I'm not talking about art in the sense of, it's so beautiful, so that justifies being a monster. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the actual ideological effect of a work may be overwhelmingly positive despite who created it. And that becomes a problematic issue for me.
So what's interesting there too is the old idea. I'll cut you off there, sorry.
I don't really know where it's going. So
cut me off too.
Sometimes
you're
saving
two with one sentence there.
We'll go to Shauna's there. I just want to say, but this also buys into the long narrative of the asshole genius. That it's okay for geniuses to be fucking horrible because they're so.
I hate that narrative too. There's a great play that we study in first year called Mr. Bailey's Minder that's about exactly that. And I got into a debate once with another lecturer who said, no, it does justify. I went, no, this guy's a monster. Yeah. But I guess that's on an aesthetic level. And I'm talking sort of more on an ideological level where... An aesthetic level, an asshole paints a beautiful painting, fuck off, I don't care. But an asshole creates something that has a positive social impact. That is a more difficult question for me.
I've just realised a problem with being in person. When you're both on my laptop, I see both of you at once and I see Sean's expressions. I'm like, he's about to talk, and I throw over to him. But I'm sitting here and we're both staring straight at Alex.
Okay, stop looking
at me. So let's look at Sean.
He's so handsome. He's so manly.
This is Danny Zuko-ness.
And I quite like hiding in the background. Maybe we need to start doing hand signals like Frank Zappa used to.
Clap. Why do you clap?
Clap. Don't pick on him.
I'll knock my microphone stand over.
But where do you stand
Rub your elbow.
Okay, I am rubbing my elbow right now.
When you do it, it's obscene. Where do you stand on that issue, do you think?
Look, I don't know. But I do wonder if we're asking a little bit too much of our creators because nobody's perfect on every front. One of you, maybe Amy, used the phrase hot mess before, human hot mess. We're all human hot messes. And
some hotter than others.
So, yeah, that's right. I don't even know what that means. But
I don't know, but I'm ashamed that it came out of my mouth.
Don't judge his work on that.
Well, that's right. I'm a hot mess, and everybody I know is a hot mess, and my work's not perfect. And even if it was perfect, I'd still be a hot mess. And even if I was a perfect person, you know what I'm trying to say.
It does scare me as an author. Like, I'd rather be totally invisible. I can see why someone like Thomas Pynchon is totally invisible.
When Facebook first started, I tried very hard to curate my Facebook feed really carefully to make myself seem interesting and cultured and all that kind of stuff. But then I eventually realized that was really hard work, and I was censoring myself. You know, if I said something wrong, it was just terrible. So I thought, I'll just be myself. And
Brussels sprouts.
That's where all the Brussels sprouts came from. Brussels sprouts and what else? Weird music and all sorts of crazy stuff goes up there. And I just thought, well, I don't have to talk about work. I can just talk about me. This is a device for amplifying me, warts and all. I mean, I would try to be very careful not to offend people. I would try to engage in discussions. But if I didn't want to have a discussion with somebody about a point they disagree with, I could just not do it. And if they didn't like it, then that was fine. I didn't feel like I had to feel bad about myself for not everybody liking me. I mean, that's normal. So I think I learned to forgive myself as a public figure most of the time. There are times where I have done stupid things in public. One of them was at a national science fiction convention where I was a practitioner of Tai Chi at that point, and another fellow who was into martial arts. We invented, instead of Tai Chi, Sai Chi. So we used all these gestures and movements from science fiction, like the Vulcan. And we demonstrated it at the opening ceremony and didn't even consider that it was cultural appropriation until somebody who was in the audience tweeted. And this big discussion happened online, and I felt devastated that I'd been part of this inadvertently. So, issued a public apology and all that sort of stuff. Did all the right things, I hope.
But you're exposed, right? That you can't do anything without, because the other thing, we've talked about this on the show a lot, about this show can be a bit daunting because we've all got big mouths.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And you say something, you're like, oh, did I say that loud?
Usually Sean helps us out later on. I think apologies are interesting, though, because I think if someone issues a sincere, genuine apology, then we should actually factor that in. And that's something we're not doing as a culture enough, to actually go, you know what, you owned it. I mean, it's the difference between a forced apology and a sincere one. But if someone sincerely apologises, I think that should count for more.
Yeah.
And there are guides online. Scalzi, one of the most prominent science fiction writers in recent years, has issued guidelines on how to apologise online. Because a lot of people aren't taught how to do it, and it's really difficult and it's really confronting, as it should be, to apologise properly, to admit not just that you've done something wrong, but how you got it wrong, and what you'll do to not change your behaviour in the future. I mean, that's such an important ameliorative process that allows healing and progress and all that good stuff.
And I think you have to not be so introspective that it freezes you up, right, as an artist. And I think that's the problem. Like, I've stayed really off Twitter, and I've even, my Facebook's died down. I don't have a book coming out, so it's easier, but I've kept it pretty light and fluffy because I'm not interested in engaging in that way. I like engaging with the real humans face to face mostly.
Yeah, I think I use Twitter to reach out to like-minded people that are not in my vicinity, and there's something nice about that. I think you're very good, though,
too, at the arguments online. Like, you quite enjoy them.
You actually engage.
Yeah. You will go there as a kind of strategy, whereas that's not something that works for me. So that's
something I fell into. It wasn't deliberate, I don't think.
But I think everyone's very, very different. But I noticed writing this latest book, you were talking about like your environmental warrior nature. Every time I was mentioning something like flying on a plane, I'd be like, do I want to be like doing that? Like, do I want to make some comment at some point about the environment to show that this is actually really damaging? Do I want to be like, you don't want to perpetuate? Then it's like you get to a point where it's like you can't think about this now. You just have to write the story. Think about it in the next draft.
You become a bit like that guy in The Good Place, the only guy that ever got into The Good Place, who just has to do everything perfect. I think Michael McKean plays the character, and he can't and he steps on a snail at one point and goes, what if that was the world's best snail? And there's a point where you have to... balance it out.
Anyway, we're out of time. I think we could come back to this maybe and talk about specific artists next time. Like maybe pick a couple and hash it out. That might be a really interesting way to consider this, because this is not an issue that's going away. In fact, it seems to be gathering pace and steam in our current climate. So it's something that worries me. And like Sean, I'm always desperate not to give offence, but then you don't want to never say anything either.
And putting the spotlight on artists is not to name and shame them. It's just to
discuss. Like we'll do it. Yes. We'll do it with deep sympathy for their courage for actually putting their work out there, which I think as authors you always feel that.
Absolutely.
Like applause for writing something, getting it out in the world, and being brave. So we'll wrap up there. Welcome back to in-person Word Docs. It's nice to see you both.
We've got our chocolate here. Amy hasn't had any yet, which is why she's making the most sense. And Alex and I are babbling like sugar enraged
Alex, do you want to say happy writing, or you want to take us out with some Danny Zuko?
I'm not going to burst into Grease lightning. I would love, just by the by, to play Teen Angel in Grease. I'm not quite old enough yet. When I hit like my 50s, that is a life goal that I think
to come down those stairs.
Yeah. Beauty school dropout. I think I could do that really well one day.
All right.
I'll take us out with happy tweeting.
Happy tweeting, everyone.
Happy tweeting.
See you next time.
Why don't you write when you don't need money? All your notes sound alike too much. All of them starts with I love you, honey, but they end with the same old touch. Just for a change, send a nice loving letter and cut out that please remit. Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
So, who's hosting?
I don't know what the subject is.
Who's the most disappointing?
Who's the most disappointing?
Okay, Amy. No, that wasn't a follow-up.
That's how you really feel, Alex.
Don't know back.
I'm going to sit back from the microphone because I can see...
I'm going to try not to kick the feet.
It's quite large. Hello.
Quite large. Mine's really not too large, but before it, then it got too big, so I'm not going to watch.
Are we going back to Alex's dating advice now?
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.